Thanks everybody for coming. I'm Todd Mahon, the State History Services Manager at the Minnesota Historical Society, and this is a webinar that I'm doing with my colleague David Kelliher, who's our Vice President of Public Policy and Government Relations. And the webinar is titled Connecting with Your Elected Officials, Making the Case for State and Local Public Funding. February 14th, lots of signs of spring going out there. Legislature's in session, always a good sign for spring either being here or coming. Pitchers and catchers reported yesterday, I think, for the Twins, and other major league teams are there or starting today. And then, of course, Valentine's Day, so you can send a Valentine to your elected official. And History Matters Day is on the calendar, so that's going to be on Thursday, February 27th. We're going to David's definitely going to cover talking about that a little bit, as he's going to be focusing more on talking to legislators and that side of things. And then I'm going to come in at the end and talk more about local officials, county commissioners, city council, town board, and that type of thing. Spoiler alert, there's a lot of sort of similar things, but there's some differences too. So we'll get to that. And then would be remiss for not talking a little bit about local history services. I manage our local history services team, which is here to help history organizations across the state. I kind of like to describe it as we help organizations that are doing history that aren't the Minnesota Historical Society. And we like to say that we help you all figure out what you want to do and how you can do that. And there's a lot of things that you can do, and how you can do that sometimes can be with grants, though not always. But so we've got roles with our grant program too. We're all content reviewers with our grant program, and it's probably a poor analogy, but I can never get away from it. We're sort of the grant salesman too, so we're there to help you talk to you about what might be good for you for grants and might not be. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague David Kelliher. And David, take it away. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Todd. Thanks for getting us organized here, and thanks everyone for joining this morning. Hope many of you are planning to join us for History Matters Day at the Capitol, just under 2 weeks away on February 27th. So as Todd said, I'm going to focus on History Matters Day at the Capitol, which is by definition advocacy at the state level and letting Minnesota state legislators know about the benefits of state funding. But a lot of what I'm going to walk through, particularly in the how, is very applicable to advocacy at other levels, at the local level, when you're talking to your city council, county board, township, or whatever other local unit of government or other unit of government that you might be talking to. So I have a PowerPoint, and hopefully... All right, awesome. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. All right, so I'm going to walk through some of the logistics and schedule for History Matters Day at the Capitol, and then go through some tips for talking to your legislator or other elected official. And again, that's where this is more widely applicable. And then some specific talking points for history advocacy. If you guys have some questions, please jump in, interrupt for clarifications. Happy to walk through some of our experiences with History Matters Day at the Capitol and advocacy in general, and/or we'll take some questions at the end when we're done. So here we go. The nitty-gritty logistics for History Matters Day at the Capitol. Thursday, February 27th will be our 19th annual History Matters Day at the Capitol. I think we've only been snowed out once. One year we had heavy snow and said, just come over if it's safe. But we'll hope for decent weather in a couple of weeks, knock on wood. We are going to be at the Capitol. Parking is a little tight around the Capitol, so if you want to come to the History Center for free parking, bonus, we're running a shuttle from the History Center to the Minnesota State Capitol every 20 minutes. Just gonna run a loop and come and get everyone. If you're brave and it's cold out like it has been this week, it's a a brisk 10 or 15-minute walk up to the Capitol, and we'll take a look at a map in a second. The general lineup is we'll have a welcome gathering, have some coffee and pastries and whatnot in the lower level of the Capitol basement, Leitwald du Nord room, which is a nice, comfortable space for getting together. And we'll hear some remarks from Kent Whitworth, Director and CEO of the Minnesota Historical Society, and maybe a couple other special guests who may drop in. We will answer any questions you might have about your individual appointments or how to do this. If you're new at this, sometimes it's a little intimidating to go in and talk to legislators. They're people too. They don't bite, and they're generally happy to see you because you're constituents. But if you have any questions about how to go about the meeting and want to talk one-on-one after we do our welcome, we'll have some time for informal one-on-one conversations. The other thing related to that is what we try to do is pair people up for their appointments wherever possible. So if there are folks coming in from a region of the state, they might do more than 2 or 3 appointments, but join with their colleagues to work as a team and maybe meet with someone who's not their own legislator, but just join someone to be supportive and talk about what you're doing. So then we'll have a history information fair in the Capitol Rotunda. That's on the first floor of the Capitol from roughly 9:30 to 11:30. And we've got a limited number of tables, but I think Malm is going to have a table, and a few other umbrella organizations and other organizations will be having an opportunity to talk to legislators and staff who will walk by and learn about what we do for history. So the Leitwald du Nord room on the that's incorrect. It's level B, not the ground floor. It's just so confusing in the Capitol. We'll be there. Space is pretty limited in the Capitol, so we can get that space for a block of 2 hours. So we'll have it until about 10:30. If you are done with some of your appointments by 10:30, we have a feedback form. We'd love to hear how your meeting went. If you got some reactions, good, bad, or otherwise, from your legislator. It's really important to know if someone had a bad experience with one of our organizations or doesn't understand how funding works. We want to know that and try to go back and talk to them a little bit more. So for that limited amount of time that we have that room, you can use that as a home base, and we'll figure out a place where you can leave your coat and stuff while you're wandering around. We might have a different location down the hall from the Leitwald du Nord. Okay, so mention free parking. Please take some photos and share your experiences on social media and use the hashtag History Matters Day. And after advocating, you're going to need lunch. We don't want anyone being hangry talking to legislators. So the Rathskeller and the basement level of the Capitol cafeteria, Capitol has some good stuff. Or if you're back here at the History Center, the cafe in the History Center is open on that Thursday. So if you have some extra time, come on by the History Center and check out some of the exhibits on the 3rd floor of the History Center if you haven't had a chance to do that. And we'll make that available for participants in History Matters Day for free. And if you haven't had a chance to take a tour of the Minnesota State Capitol, Minnesota Historical Society runs those tour programs, and our colleagues do a great job doing tours. They take about 45 minutes and leave at the top of the hour throughout the day. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, highly recommend that. It's really informative. All right, so here's a map of the Capitol complex. We will have on the day of, or maybe a couple days before, a one-pager that will look something like this. that will have a lot of the information that we're talking about this morning, a map of the capital area, some of the talking points and logistics. So you don't have to memorize everything that we're talking about this morning. We'll have it all boiled down to one page. So circled here is the history center at the bottom of this map. Right in the middle is the state capitol, where a lot of the hearings will take place, and that's where we'll gather in the L'Etoile du Nord room on the basement level, and then on the first floor in the rotunda. Legislators have their offices in the Senate building, which is the other circle right across the street, University Ave from the Capitol. And then this year, and we did fix this on the handout that you will be getting on the day, the state office building is under renovation. So delete that circle and move that circle over to the Centennial office building, which is below and to the right of the state capitol. All House members have their offices there while the state office building is being renovated. And interesting to look at that construction project as you're walking around the Capitol. All right, so some tips for meeting with legislators. And, you know, these are mostly common sense, but worth taking a minute to run through them and think about how you're going to approach your meeting. You will sometimes have just 10 or 15 minutes on the legislator's schedule, so you want to make the most of that time. Be on time. Don't rush in a few minutes late. One of the things you need to think through is if you're going to Centennial for meetings with House members, they have a little more security than they had in the state office building. So you have to have a staff person escort you, key card the elevator. So leave, 5 to 10 minutes extra before you head over there. You can walk through the tunnels, through the maze. I don't think you'll get lost, but allow enough time to get over there. Don't think I need to tell everyone to be polite. Don't be antagonistic. That's not going to help our cause. And be prepared with some information about what you do and what's happening. Keep it short and simple. You might have them for a couple of minutes. A lot of times what will happen is if they have committee hearings, they might say, we don't have time to have a meeting in the legislator's office, but we'll pull them out of committee, which means the staff person, legislative assistant will go in to the committee, and when they have a minute where they can step out, you'll have a meeting in the hallway, and you'll have like 3 or 4 minutes to introduce yourself and say why you're there and make your pitch, and that can be just as valuable as sitting down for 15 or 20 minutes. So you want to remind them that you're a constituent, that you're either you live or work in their district and doing great things in their district. So we'll talk a little, number 4, what are we asking for? We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next section. Make the issue personal. What impact has history had on you personally or your community? Storytelling is great while keeping it short and sweet, but impact is really important for them to hear. Say thanks again. Give them any handouts that you might bring along. We're not really providing a lot of handouts, but bring anything that you have from your history organization, museum, whatnot. So if they are not available, leave your handouts and or a business card with the legislative assistant to just make sure that they know that you were here and that you stopped by and took the time to say hello and stop by. I mentioned before the feedback form, really important for us to learn more about what you're hearing from legislators, but also give us some feedback on how History Matters Day is organized and went for you. We usually change up a few things each year in response to some of the feedback. So let us know how it's going, what worked well, what didn't work well, and we'll make it better next time. So February 27th does not need to be the end. You want to continue the relationship. So you can quite easily send a thank you note via email. either directly, or if you aren't sure, or if you can't make it that day and just want to be at your desktop and be an advocate from home, you can visit mnhs.org/history matters, and all you need to do is punch in your address, and that system, voter voice, will direct you to your legislators, House and Senate members from your district, and you can send a note to them. So it's great if you were able to meet with them to send a thank you note or a letter. Good old-fashioned paper letter will get attention, because those are pretty rare these days, or a card or something like that. Those really mean a lot to folks, instead of the mass emails that they often will see. Invite your legislator to events that you might have throughout the year, whether it's a program, a lecture, an opening. They're part of the community. They want to be part of the community. When you have folks there at an event, they want to see their constituents. So invite them to come to your location. Again, take some pictures while you're out and about. I'm gonna keep going here. All right, so what are we looking for this year at the state level? And again, Todd's going to come back to local history, but at the state level, state support for history comes in three areas. General fund funding helps us at the Minnesota Historical Society keep our historic sites network and museums and history center running. Things like local history services and some of the other outreach efforts that we do largely comes from state support, both from the general fund and legacy funding. For legacy, legacy is awesome, and I'm sure that most of you know about legacy. It's the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund of the Legacy Amendment, 3/8 of a cent of sales tax that goes towards outdoors and arts and cultural things. I'm going to come back to that because I have a different slide on that, so I'll spend a little bit more time on that. And then the capital budget, which they do every other year, supposedly in the even numbered year, which they didn't pass a capital budget bill, or sometimes known as a bonding bill. They didn't do that last year, so they're going to work on it this year. And one of the requests that we have before the capital investment committees is a grants program for cities and counties. Those capital budget dollars have to go to public entities like cities and counties. So that grant program would help cities and counties take care of their most significant historic structures. So kind of went through this. So let me just spend another minute on Legacy Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Since the life of the Legacy Amendment, with state funding, with legacy funding, there have been over 3,000 grants that have gone out to all 87 counties, hundreds and hundreds, almost maybe up to 1,000 different organizations. And I hope you would agree that it really has been a fantastic thing for the field. So that is a main focus of what we're talking about. If you've received a grant, if you would like to receive a grant, it's really important that you talk to legislators and let them know of the impact or the need, and that the grants program and other history programs are important resources for our state. So that's one of our main focus areas for History Matters Day at the Capitol this year. Okay, so a few other talking points. Making a personal connection to history, what history means to you, discoveries of history can help to illustrate to legislators the impact and the importance. One of the things that is an interesting approach is that the state spends a lot of money on education, K-12 and higher ed. And really, we all are in the education business. We help Minnesotans to learn about the past, it's not the traditional classroom sense, but learning, lifelong learning can happen in many ways. Visiting a historic site, doing research in a library, doing family history. So making that pitch that we are really part of the educational continuum for lifelong learners. And lifelong learners doesn't need to be older people. It can be younger people too, who just have a curiosity about history. All right, so here's the timeline of what is happening, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this year's legislative session because I could be here for quite a long time, but suffice it to say that the session kind of began in January and began again in February, and with some of the issues with a tie and not a tie and all that in the House and Senate, they're on a roll now. So they're organized and holding committee hearings and getting going. So our History Matters Day at the Capitol, February 27th. Committees are doing their work, and the committees set themselves some deadlines. Those have not been set yet, but they're likely to be in March and April, and that's when policy bills and budget bills need to be done. So by April, we'll start to see what various budget bills will look like. They'll take a recess for Easter and Passover in April, and then after they come back from that recess, they've got roughly a month to finish up budget bills, and they have to finish by Monday, May 19th. That's the constitutional deadline for finishing up the regular session. And let's keep our fingers crossed and hope that they can get all their work done by then. We don't want to talk about a shutdown or anything like that, but let's hope that they get all the work done and move forward. All right. So again, I mentioned a second ago, voter voice allows you and other members of your organization, staff, colleagues, volunteers, if they can't make it to History Matters Day at the Capitol, you can be a desktop advocate on History Matters Day at the Capitol or any other day. And voter voice, which you can link through MNHS.org, History Matters, is a very easy way to do that. All right, I am done with my part and very happy to have a conversation, answer any questions that you might have. Clear as mud.
Well, I think there'll be times for questions at the end too, and certainly David, in my section, please feel free to pipe in. And as David mentioned with his before his slides, feel free to interrupt me or ask questions for clarification. I'm usually better that way, to be honest. So you can interrupt me from my reading off the screen and ask me a question, then I can actually sort of talk about what I know rather than what I'm reading. So, which probably just tells you this is going to be boring. Hopefully not. So I'm just going to kind of wrap up here. I probably won't have as much content as David had, but in some ways, as I said before, I mean, it's a lot of sort of similar philosophy on it. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the theories and ideas of talking to your local elected officials. I certainly, before I came to work here at the Minnesota Historical Society, I worked with the two county historical societies, Anoka and Hennepin, and so I worked with my county commissioners on that. And so some of this is my experience, and some of it is also just my working with local organizations across the state for the last 10 years, and even before that when I was with the Minnesota Alliance of Local History Museums, and kind of what I heard from them and their experiences too. So before I sort of get into that, I'm going to kind of draw back just a little bit and talk about Minnesota State Statute 138.053. And you're like, oh, I thought we were just talking about local stuff. Well, there's a state statute, a state law that actually comes into play with the conversations that you can have with your local elected officials. I can certainly read the statute here, but primarily it's sort of the pathway that that allows cities, counties, townships to provide financial support to their local historical society. And there was an important change to this statute, I think in 2019, somewhere before 2020, which is always that sort of muddy mess in your memory, but that clarified that and made a small change that townships and cities can fund their city and township historical society. Prior to that, the language in the statute specifically said that they could provide it to their adjacent to their county historical society. Now there were several, plenty, whatever you want to say, cities and townships that found a way to sort of do sort of like a contract for history services or that type of thing. But this modest 2 or 3 word change into the statute actually sort of clarified it and made it a lot easier. So we're starting to see more cities and townships providing some support for their cities and counties. And in a lot of ways, that was sort of the impetus for the change. There had been a lot of question about it, and then there was some concern, caution about, well, can we actually do this? And so some legislators and with some help from the Alliance of Local History Museums and MNHS, we all got together and found a solution for it. And so there's this change. So the important piece of this to remember is that it doesn't require that the city, county, township, whomever provide financial support to their historical society. What it does is it provides a pathway for it. And I think what I always sort of like point to with it is like what it does is in the state statute, it sort of highlights and states a special relationship that the local historical society has with their city, township, or county. And that's what makes us different from other worthy and wonderful organizations, social services and other nonprofit organizations that can and sometimes do receive some public funding. But we've got a special relationship that's actually spelled out there in state statute. So 138.053. Now you might see what's bolded down there at the bottom, that unless that the organization has to be affiliated with and approved by the Minnesota Historical Society. So what does that mean? Well, the statute doesn't define it, as I had the whole statute up there, and it doesn't say what it means, but we've defined it in a particular way for decades, and it's been the way that it has been sort of utilized. So we've got 3 criteria for this, and they're listed here on the slide. The first one is that the organization is a dues-paying member of the Minnesota Historical Society. That means that you're one of our institutional members. And I also want to be clear, like, you don't have to do any of this to apply for a grant or to get connect with us on other matters and with local history services. This is the criteria that can be brought up. Although in my observation, I think there are organizations that don't meet this criteria that do receive funding. It's more like when somebody asks, do you meet the criteria? And so as I said here, so there's the organizational membership. So that's our institutional membership. And what you get with that, and it's a $40 membership, and you get a subscription to our magazine, the bi-monthly e-newsletter, which is not the local history e-news. Again, that's a separate thing, and anybody can sign up for that. And you get other benefits too, parking discount at the History Center and at Fort Snelling, and then 10% discount on purchases at MNHS, including the library for copies and things like that. So that's the institutional membership. The slightly confusing part is that it's not something that you can register for online when you go and do your family or individual membership. We pull that back because it can be confusing for other memberships. So if you need a membership form, you can connect with me. Todd Mahon is todd.mahon@mnhs.org, or you can email localhistoryservices@mnhs.org. And we'll get you the form, and then you can make your payment that way. And then after that, our membership office can work with you to renew the membership. So that's the institutional membership. Second one is that Local History Services, that's me and the Local History Services team, have a copy of your current bylaws on file. You can provide that electronically, or you can mail me a paper copy. I definitely get those. And then this is sort of like the least defined one, but the one that I'm certainly flexible with on is that there's some contact with MNHS in the previous year. Definitely we count grants, and those are kind of easy to track. We're very tracking grants and who has open ones and who has had them. So that's one. I definitely count other things in there, certainly site visits, and I do a lot of site visits, but I definitely don't visit all the sites in a given year. But I include phone calls and emails. I also include newsletters, and so I keep track of the newsletters that I get reasonably well. And then also within that, well, like I said, site visits and that type of thing. And some organizations have in their bylaws that they send an annual report to the Minnesota Historical Society Local Services. That definitely will count. And so if you are creating an annual report, as you probably should be doing, and you provide it for your membership or your donors and supporters, go ahead and send that along to me at Minnesota Historical Society, and we'll count it towards the 138 criteria. As I said, this doesn't come up, like it's not something that we track per se, and that somebody that it has to be sort of like confirmed if you're getting city, county, and township funding. Often when it comes up is if the city, county, or township connects with us to confirm that the organization meets the criteria. Usually that comes in a voicemail or an email, and so before I respond to them, I'm usually checking to see if it meets the criteria. If there's something missing, I'll connect with you, the organization, first before I connect back with the organization, the city or the township or county, to get that. And then frankly, that usually takes care of criteria number 3. There's some contact established that way. So that's usually the way that we handle it. So anyway, as I said, if you have any questions about that, you can email or send any of those materials to localhistory@mnhs.org, or you can mail it to the address that's there. All right, so that's kind of the baseline for city, county, and township funding. Now, this is going to be a little bit of sort of like similar to what David was saying about working with elected officials. It's a lot of the sort of same things. It's not all that different than how you work with your other donors and supporters. You figure out what they need, what you can offer, and try to find out where everything lines up. So it's always, you want to create your relationships first. Usually if their first contact with you is that you're asking them for financial support, it can be easy for them to be dismissive of it or to move on to something else. If they've got a relationship with you or they know something about you beforehand, that is a great way to go. So the better that they know you before you ask, and the more likely they are to respond positively to your request. And you can do this in a lot of ways. You can definitely offer tours of your museum, invitations to your events and programs. Make sure that your county board, your township board, your city council are getting those, and that they can be there. And if you're having these one-on-one meetings with them, bring your board and other board members to these meetings, especially if they've got an existing relationship with. I'm just going to admit that, especially if they've got an existing relationship with any of the people that are on the council or the town board. And then certainly a lot of I think pretty much everybody, town boards and county commissioners and city councils have open forums when they meet. Go and attend those open sessions and just share about your organization's successes and programs without asking for something. Just be there and talk about the programs that are coming up, the new exhibit that's opening, the house tour that's happening, or those types of things. And the bonus is that these meetings are often shown on local media and that type of thing. And so then you sort of like share that out with the general public as well. So just attending their meetings is a really great thing to do as well. Second thing that I've got on here is play to your strengths and contacts. And this is also, and it sort of goes with being adaptable here, and you're going to see being adaptable in all of my slides, because that's kind of like the key thing with working with any relationship, is sort of knowing what's unique to that relationship and what needs to be tended with it. But play to your strengths and your contacts. And they all make their budgets differently a little bit. And, there's some things that they're sort of legally obligated to do, but sometimes it really is staff driven. And sort of it can very much depend on the size of the unit of local government, or it can also be very much driven by the elected officials. And so if you sort of like, if you have a Maybe you just know somebody in the Parks Department, and that's kind of the person that you work with a lot. It's still a good place to start. Talk to them and see, certainly if they can bring it forward, but also if they can just sort of like tell you a little bit about how things can happen either in front of the scenes or even behind the scenes with the city, county, or township. And so definitely do that. If you've got somebody on your board that is a former elected official or a current elected official, of course, work with them too. And again, just sort of like play to what your strengths are and your contacts are, and then use that to sort of build out from there. All right, sort of continuing on that, do your homework, listen to what their needs and their priorities are. I always I always think about when Legacy first came online, and this is a lesson I learned from David a long time ago before I was even at MNHS, and maybe this is something he says to everybody, or maybe he'll be like, I don't remember saying that at all. But when the Legacy Amendment had passed, I was staffed at the Anoka County Historic Society, but I was also serving on the board of the Minnesota Alliance of Local History Museums, and so we were helping to do some statewide conversations and also figure out, now that the Constitutional Amendment had passed, the legislature was deciding, well, how are we going to sort of distribute this? And we were definitely talking a lot about needs, and that's definitely a part of the conversation. But David would say, needs, everybody has needs, and they often hear about needs, and so it's and they want to hear about needs in their own way, but they also want to hear like what they're going to get for what the public is going to get for the expenditure on it. So just to sort of say like, we need this to operate is can be an argument, but often more successful argument is like, if we get this support, here's what we can offer with it. So as I said, each of these units of government, they can be unique in how they're smaller, and this is often a smaller funding decision for them, which can be nice, and it can be hard to sort of be in that spot with larger public budgets. But sometimes expenses from the budget can, as I said before, come from senior staff like a finance director or a county administrator or a city manager. But sometimes smaller items can also come from an enthusiastic or an influential commissioner or council member. And township budgets are often done at township annual meetings. And sometimes township budget requests can be created in a town board meeting with specific requests. And so I know when I was, again, with the Anoka County Historical Society, we had one township left in the county, Linwood Township. I believe it's still a township. We had a couple that incorporated while I was there. But we could go to the town meeting and make a request, usually for a small amount of a couple $100, or I think we may have asked for $1,000, and they would make that decision at the town board meeting. And so, again, do your homework. Know how these things get made. Usually counties have to set their levy in August, I think. And so that kind of sets up the parameters for, they can change, what's going to be spent within the amount that they've created and where it's going to go. But they know like when the sort of like major benchmarks are. Like in one of David's slides earlier, he sort of had the calendar for the legislative session of when the committees expect to have their work done, and when things go to the general to the House and to the Senate. And so can be sometimes too late when if you sort of jump in too late. So do your homework and understand when those how they make their budgets. And as I said, you really want to be specific about how those requests are made, and understand if a form needs to be filled out. Do they expect a presentation? Do they not want a presentation? Again, that's where sort of the being adaptable is really important. So be prepared to share your request in a presentation form at a meeting, but likely that might be in tandem with a request through other channels. But that presentation can also really help them understand the nuances of, can sort of certainly put a face to it, but when you start talking about the exhibits and the programs and things that you do, that can really sort of bring to life what might be on the form that might be rather short and brief, that just sort of talks about personnel and costs and things like that. All right, and then making the pitch, and this is my last official slide here. So oftentimes we want to compare ourselves to other neighbor organizations, and I think this can be effective, but it's also something that you have to be careful with too. it's common to want to say that other counties provide more funding or a greater amount of funding per capita, but once you open that comparison, the county, in this case, the county or the city or the township, might sort of also like look at other comparisons where they provide more support than another city, county, or township, and so it can be sort of a tricky argument. And just know that they're not likely just going to sort of like go on your information. We get questions at the Minnesota Historical Society occasionally from these city, county, or townships that are asking, like, well, what other financial support do other cities, counties, and townships provide for their history organizations? And we have some information on it, but we don't actually sort of like track it in total. But more to the point, they're calling because they're asking for that information because they're looking to make a funding decision. And it was probably that comparison was often prompted by the local history organization sort of bringing that up. So as I mentioned, you can definitely talk about 138. I think that's definitely a way to sort of like talk about the special relationship with you have, but it's best not to reframe it as a requirement, which it isn't, to be clear. But just as I said before, talk about it as like your special relationship with the city, county, or township. Elected officials, as I mentioned before, they don't always respond to what your needs are. They might be sympathetic and interested, but it should be framed with what you can provide in programs and services with the requested funding. It's always helpful to be specific. If they provide X amount of dollars, that you can provide X amount of services, or you can staff the museum for this number of hours, you can produce this many exhibits, or you can do these many tours, or that type of thing. If they are reducing funding, you can sometimes be forced to make specific adjustments. That can happen. And again, be adaptable. Think about how they can help you outside of financial support. This could be things like building maintenance. They might own your building. Are there other things that they could do for the building, groundskeeping, and those types of things? Can they provide space for you for collection storage or an exhibit gallery or something like that in the city hall or county courthouse or that type of thing? They might provide that. Think about what they do already and what they might be able to sort of also extend to you. IT services. Maybe you can buy into their employee benefits, healthcare. We don't see that a lot, but we've seen that a little bit. And we've even seen in recent years more 501c3 nonprofit organizations being staffed by county employees, where they're the existing organization where they become county employees, and that allows them to directly access those benefits and those types of things. So it can be a great financial benefit for organizations. Again, that's a sort of like if that is something that's on the table, there's a lot to consider with it, but there's a couple of organizations that have been offered that by their counties and have taken that on. So think about the things that they can do for you besides finances, and those might be just more appetizing. They're already clearing snow from sidewalks, and you're right across the street from the county courthouse, or that type of thing. So again, be adaptable. So as you probably noticed, that's a lot of sort of similarities between a lot of things that David said. But I think there was a question in the chat, but I think it was directed to David, so I'm not sure if he got the chance to answer that or not. But we've got time for questions. And as mentioned before, there will be a recording made available of this at some point in the near future, but happy to talk about questions.
Todd, can you go back to your slide for David's question? Can you go back to your slide with the statute? Yeah, thanks. On the third line down, or second line, not to, I'll read it. May appropriate from its general fund an amount not to exceed 0.2418% of estimated market value. And Todd, tell me if you read this the same way. Estimated market value is the total value of property. Cities and counties work off of property taxes. So, you know, if you got one house that's worth $250,000 plus a business that's worth $750,000, et cetera, everything in the city or county added up is the estimated market value. So, you know, 0.0214%, that's probably a very small number. And Todd, I don't know if you've ever compiled.
I haven't. This is
that.
Because there's
You know,
other.
the Minnesota Department of Revenue probably has some tables that say, Hennepin County estimated market value of all the property in Hennepin County or Monoman County, and then, just do the math of 0.02418 is some number. So, David, I hope that answers your question, but my take on that is it's not a percentage of the tax collected, it's a percentage of the value of property.
Yeah, that's the way I've read it too, but I totally defer to you, David Kelliher, on this. David, if you want to, you can certainly add more to this or not, but I know that you sort of emailed me a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago, and there's also and I didn't put it up here because it's not so directly related to this, 138.051, which is about doing a levy, and that has different percentages in it, and so there, to my understanding, there aren't any county historic societies that are receiving money from a direct levy at this time. There was one that has put it on the ballot a couple of times and have gotten close, and I don't know if they're going to try it again, but there are some differences there, and I think that one spells out the 0.051 is not so much about the property tax values, but is a direct.
It's a percentage of the taxes collected.
Yeah.
So I to put a finer point on it, I think, Todd, you're making the distinction between 138.053, which is cities or towns, and 051, which permits expenditures and makes a reference to levies, which is, I again, I'm getting out of my league here, but a levy would continue unless repealed by the county board or the voters or city council or members. So if you guys want to dive more deeply into this, I know there are a lot of resources on the Department of Revenue website, and then House Research and Senate Research do a lot of really, really high quality, easy to understand background papers, and we can do a deeper dive on this if that's an issue in your area that people are asking questions about it. We can tailor some answers to the questions that are being asked.
Well, I don't know how many people are planning to attend History Matters Day on the 27th, but it was kind of mentioned before, but also, I'm certainly available, and we can find other folks at MNHS if you are meeting with legislators and want a partner to come along. I know a lot of the regional groups tend to send a couple of people along, and they travel together, which I think is a very effective model. And if you want another smiling, supportive face to come along with you, I'm definitely available. And I know that I think we can also maybe convince some other folks to participate that way too. So.
Yeah, a bunch of our colleagues here at MNHS who have done meetings in St. Paul and Washington, D.C. would be happy to join. If you can give us a heads up, we'll get it on everyone's calendar as you get appointments made, and tag along and go as a team and make it fun.
Well, I'm terrible with silence, but I'm going to give it a few second count of, and then otherwise we can wrap it up. So I'm going to count silently in my head for more questions.
You guys must have some questions.
You broke my my count.
Bad jokes, puns.
Dave, in your experience, have you found that there are any sort of particular, generally speaking, any particular topics that you find tend to resonate with legislators as a whole? I know you mentioned taking advantage of the fact that we're in education, working with schools, things like that. Anything else that could kind of apply to all of us that we might be able to put in the toolbox?
Yeah, I think two themes that are effective, not in any particular order, is that the local impact. Your museum is part of the community, is part of the community's identity, and is important in that regard. And a related pitch talking point is that we all, as part of heritage tourism, are part of the tourism economy. And I think that tourism is an $11 billion industry in Minnesota. Now that includes people going camping and hiking and skiing and whatever else people do. But we know from a lot of studies that people who are doing heritage tourism, and people might do multiple things on a visit. So it's not like you're just going skiing or just going to museums. You might do both. But people who do heritage tourism tend to stay longer and therefore spend some money. So not only are we part of the community, that sort of intangible identity and that piece, but we're also more tangibly part of the economy and part of the tourism economy. So that's another pitch that is helpful to make sometimes.
There's also it's less specific, but there are some specifics on there, and they've kind of wrapped up their work. And I haven't looked at their website for several months, but so I hope it's still there. But they've kind of wrapped up their work. But there was the history relevance campaign that got going 7-10 years ago, and they were kind of got started as a mild response, or maybe to STEM and STEAM advocacy, and they weren't sort of antagonistic towards it, but they're sort of like, well, what is history sort of like, what's the messages that we can sort of have around that? And it was directed towards all funding, but in a lot of ways it thinks a lot about public funding. And there's some really great sort of like, again, very general talking points, but you can sort of like you can shape them to the more local sort of piece that talks about it, and the sort of like, what is the value of history? And I mean, I think we probably see this, and again, this is where a lot of this is very relatable to how you talk to the general public and to other funders and that type of thing. But I think we all sometimes talk about the person that sort of says that they don't really care that much about history, or they don't sort of see the value in it, and that can be sort of befuddling to us, because we're like, well, what? Like, but the history relevance campaign can sort of like provide some language on it. Oh, thanks, David. And I just sort of like also think a lot about just like history being like as this great way to sort of like have a more informed citizenry and make sort of like better people out of things. And like, I can sort of exaggerate and say, I always sort of say it makes for better spouses and parents and teachers and, anything you can sort of like name. But like what it does is it builds critical thinking skills, and like we all need that. And I hope that our elected officials, also want, good informed citizens that are electing officials to do a lot of the work. But I think that the history relevance campaign can be pretty useful on it. David, I know that David Kelliher, I know that we've had from somebody I was talking about, and they went to History Matters Day last year, or the year before, and their legislators were kind of antagonistic to the legacy amendment and sort of like the funding for that. And I don't know if like there's a great sort of piece on that, or thoughts on that, but in some ways it's I don't know if there's ways to sort of say, well, even if you don't support it, like, well, it's going to be here for another, what are 10 years or so left on it, and hopefully be renewed after that. But like, so you might as well sort of like be helpful in making sure it gets to your local community or those types of things.
Yeah, Todd, that's a really great point. That the legacy amendment in 2008 passed with 56% of the vote, and that's for statewide ballots. Anyone that was left blank is counted as a no. So 56% said yes, and the rest either said no or didn't vote, so it was counted as a no. So the majority of Minnesotans said, yes, we want to do this. I think for various reasons, people back then didn't support it. And you hear legislators say, and I think I heard this in the Legacy Committee a couple of days ago, well, I didn't support this, but we're here and we're going to make the best of it. So I think, Todd, you're on the right track to say, if someone says they don't like it, say, yeah, we can have a difference of opinion on whether legacy is okay, but it's here. It's going to be here for a few more years, and we think it's accomplished some really good stuff in the history area. And as long as it's around, let's make sure it benefits our community and helps the educational work that we're all doing. I think on that topic too, sometimes someone came back last year and said, oh, legislator so and so just wanted to talk about some side issue that had nothing to do with History Matters Day at the Capitol or the Minnesota Historical Society or any local history organization. And in a case like that, you kind of, if to the extent possible, while being polite, kind of bring the conversation back to, yeah, well, that's something that has been discussed a lot in Minnesota. We're working on, preserving a building in our community or having a new exhibit to tell the story of our community, and bring the conversation back to what you're trying to do to move your work forward.
I think within that, there's sometimes, and I think this can be talking to state officials and to the local officials as well, as I think it also can be really helpful to have, the old elevator pitch sort of thing that, not about your programs per se, but that just talks about like what a history organization is and describes it. Because I can imagine too that sometimes when a county historic site might sort of come in, there might be some confusion by by somebody that sort of thinks that they are sort of more involved with what the Minnesota Historical Society is doing, and they, somebody wants to talk about whatever, Fort Snelling and hopefully praising Fort Snelling or something like that. But I think and then at the local level too, to sort of say, to be able to sort of say like, well, we are a 501c3, as not all are, but most are, or that sort of thing. But just to sort of be able to sort of like, in a very concise way, kind of describe your, I don't want to just say your legal standing, I mean, but you're just sort of your structural sort of like standing, I think can also sort of like be helpful to help. I mean, in some ways look at it as just some education on the work as well. So, well, I think we're coming up on about an hour here, so I'm gonna and I think the conversation's winding down. I want to thank Jessica for the link from AAM, that's American Alliance of Museums. I'll definitely take a look at that and share it out as I'm able to. But I want to give my sincere thanks and gratitude to David Kelliher, a good friend of local history organizations. In my experience, I definitely bring a lot of questions to him on behalf of my folks out there in the local field. But thanks everybody for coming. If you got questions, feel free to follow up. Most of you know how to get a hold of me, todd.mahon@mnhs.org, or else just send it to localhistory@mnhs.org. And it's a good way to get a hold of you. David is david.kelliher, but you can also send it to me if you've forgotten that, and I'll definitely connect with David on things. But again, thank you everybody for coming. Hope to see you all on February 27th. But and after that, hopefully see you at the Minnesota Alliance of Local History Museums conference in White Bear, late April 20 something. But thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone. Hope to see you on the 27th. Take care.